Colin Rubenstein, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Chris.
Look, you're fresh from that event at the Central Synagogue in Sydney near Bondi Junction. It was a fantastic event, an historic event, both Prime Ministers speaking, both talking warmly about the relationship and the sense of history.
Absolutely. It was an exhilarating, inspiring day, truly historic visit, first time by a sitting Israeli Prime Minister. And our Prime Minister did himself and the country proud in the way that he handled the visit, I believe, through the day, and certainly at the event at Central Synagogue this evening.
Obviously, as well as Malcolm Turnbull there were former Prime Ministers John Howard and Tony Abbott, and some Labor front benches in Mark Dreyfus and Michael Danby. So it was a heavyweight political event, but there were hundreds, in fact I think thousands of people from the broader Jewish community there. There was also a real political focus, a current focus if you like. Israel is light on for friends around the world when it comes to global politics, and Binyamin Netanyahu was particularly appreciative of Australia standing by it at the United Nations, especially over that resolution where even America abandoned it recently.
Absolutely. Australia, stood alone pretty much in condemning that wicked resolution, totally counterproductive to conflict resolution and moving a peace process forward. The Prime Minister of Israel made it a point that nothing would stop him coming here to express his appreciation and the appreciation of the people of Israel for Australia's support in these difficult times, but also for the support through the years, over 100 years, and through the history of the State of Israel itself. Australia has been at the side of Israel, and Israelis definitely appreciate that, but this was a golden opportunity, one not to be missed by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who knows us well, who's been here several times over the years, knows our community very well, and he wanted to convey to the Australian people and to the Australian government his heartfelt admiration and appreciation for the levels of moral clarity and principle that Australia has demonstrated in opposing the one-sided UN resolutions against Israel and making it clear that the way forward is for the Palestinians to drop their campaign of delegitimisation, sidling up to terrorism and violence, not ending the conflict, the patterns of incitement, the fragmentation of Palestinian society, and a repudiation of the nonsense we often hear about prematurely recognising a Palestinian state in that chaotic situation.
Well, this is the point I wanted to get on to, Colin Rubenstein, because you talk about that history with Australian support for Israel. One of the strengths of that has been that it's been bipartisan. Labor and Liberal have been strongly supportive of Israel, but you now have former Labor Party Prime Ministers in Bob Hawke and Kevin Rudd, a former Labor Foreign Minister in Bob Carr, and we know many serving members of the Labor Party who want to preemptively, if you like, recognise Palestine. Does that mean that bipartisan support is now on a knife's edge? It's perhaps behind us?
Well, it's no secret that there's a debate within elements of the Labor Party about their positions on these matters. But I think it's fair to say that in Bill Shorten, Labor still has a leader that understands the realities in the Middle East, that's firmly committed to Israel's security and welfare, and who does understand that settlements are not the core issue of the Middle East or the basic reason why we can't move forward with the Palestinians.
Although he is promising to take up the settlements issue with Benjamin Netanyahu when he meets with him, and of course he must be under enormous pressure from within to do what Bob Hawke and Bob Carr and Kevin Rudd want to do and recognise Palestine even now.
Well, look, I think Mr. Shorten understands the Middle East and understands the Israel-Palestinian issue much better than his predecessors. He's been there several times. He's been there recently. He's a student of the area. And he's the current serving opposition leader with the responsibilities. He's not yesterday's man. Some people are out of the loop. The position that the former Prime Ministers and Foreign Minister are taking reflects a misunderstanding of the realities on the ground. Some of the propositions they're advancing really have no foundation whatsoever.
Well, let's take up
Mr. Shorten is not in that camp. Mr. Shorten and so many of his colleagues on the Labor side do understand the realities, are firmly committed to Israel's security, while clearly being committed, as they certainly should be, to a two-state outcome.
Well, let's have a look, Colin Rubenstein. Let's just have a look then on those issues. Let's have a look at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responding to those calls from the former Prime Ministers.
I ask both former Prime Ministers to ask a simple question. What kind of state will it be that they're advocating? A state that calls for Israel's destruction? A state that whose territory will be used immediately for radical Islam?
This is the critical question, isn't it, Colin Rubenstein, that you can call for a Palestinian state, but at the moment you've got Gaza, for instance, controlled by Hamas, who are committed to the destruction of Israel and have been firing rockets and trying to indiscriminately kill people in Israel. And Kevin Rudd has since responded again to Benjamin Netanyahu on Facebook, and he's saying that the simple reply to Netanyahu is that the boundaries, internal security, external security, public finance and governance of a Palestinian state have all been elaborated in detail in various negotiations. But that avoids the point, doesn't it, that the Prime Minister was then alluding to. How can you have a Palestinian state when the governance of that Palestinian state is committed to the destruction of Israel?
Well, exactly. I mean, the true obstacles are the fragmentation of the Palestinians. Hamas, genocidal in its nature towards Israel, runs Gaza. The Palestinian Authority, frankly, its survival actually depends on the continuation of Israeli security. You know, the great big secret in the Middle East. But if that wasn't there, the possibility of Hamas taking over the West Bank area is rather high. And then Israel does face, right across the road, literally, a genocidal situation. The former prime ministers and foreign ministers are not, and the 60 so-called prominent anti-Israel Australians, they're not doing Palestinians any favours, because what they're doing is just reinforcing the recalcitrance, the intransigence and the dysfunctionality of the Palestinians, who are absolutely, explicitly committed to and perpetrating a unilateral strategy through international organisations to demonise and delegitimise Israel, and deliberately avoiding the very thing they must do, even as Mr. Rudd's statement implies. What they must do is come back to direct bilateral negotiations without preconditions with Israel. That's the thing they won't do. Not only have they rejected offers of the state in the past, in 2000...
Colin Rubenstein, you mentioned Kevin Rudd's statement again. He concludes that by having a go at Benjamin Netanyahu and asking him to reveal whether he'll be straight up with Australia about the use of forged Australian passports to facilitate an Israeli assassination of a member of Hamas in Dubai. Now, this is a case that's received a lot of attention in the past, but this is extraordinary now for a former Prime Minister to reveal this sort of delicate intelligence case in the public sphere like this as a riposte to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, well, he's scraping the bottom of the barrel here. There's no doubt this was an untoward event. Nobody could justify that from an Australian viewpoint at all. But to hark back to that at this stage, when we're dealing, you know, with a very fragile international state, when serious matters are at hand, I think is very much below the belt, and again, totally unhelpful.
Indeed. Colin Rubenstein, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Chris.